This is John Abrams, and this is The Variety Artist, episode 52. I learned a lot from today's interview. It's with David Skale. Dave happens to be a personal friend of mine, and I think you'll hear that in the interview. Dave's one of those guys that you may have never heard of before because he doesn't have any products on the market, but he's been dominating the Los Angeles event planning market for years. He's one of those guys that has a beautiful house, works all the time, and is always ready to help out his fellow performers. Great guy. On a personal note, I've been fighting this darn cold. Lots of emergency Dayquil and NyQuil. Those meds give me the craziest dreams. Does anybody else have crazy dreams when they're on NyQuil? Whew. All right, on to the interview.
Welcome to The Variety Artist, providing aspiring artists and entertainers with in-depth discussions from top performers from all over the world. So get ready to book some gigs, make some money, and have some fun with your host, John Abrams.
My guest today is the owner and operator of Auntie Roxie's Life of the Party and Happiness Unlimited. Combined, he has one of the largest and most successful event planning companies in Los Angeles. He's experienced the party planning world as both a performer and an agent. Variety Artist, I give you David Skale.
Hey, John.
How's it going, Dave?
Pretty okay. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. I should have said, I give you David Skale again. You were the first person who's been on my podcast twice. If anybody wants to hear more of David, listen to episode 27, where he talks all about building character and bringing your character to parties and things.
Yeah, I had a blast doing that. Glad you invited me back.
That was really, really fun. In fact, I have to be honest with everybody on here. Dave did send me his lecture notes on agents and party planning stuff. So some of the questions that I'm going to ask, I've already read through his lecture notes. They're pretty cool.
Thanks. Wanted you to kind of know where I'm coming from.
A lot of great stuff. Tell us, how did you get into the party planning biz?
You know, I'm going to say it evolved in a couple of different phases. I'll make an analogy. If you think about a manufacturer, let's say furniture, you've got the actual builder, the person who builds the furniture, and then they sell it to their wholesaler who takes your furniture and takes other people's furniture and compiles it, and then they sell in bulk to the ultimate retailer, and the retailer is going to sell it to the end customer.
Mm-hmm.
So use that as an analogy. I started off as kind of the individual builder, and I became a wholesaler. And the way that happened was back in the 80s, I was doing magic shows and magic and clown shows. That was pretty much all that people wanted for parties.
Mm-hmm.
And around 1987, 1988, I heard about this new character called the Ninja Turtles.
Oh, yeah.
I just dug them. I had a martial arts background, and I've always wanted to use my martial arts in a show. They were cool, they were campy, they were karate, and I said I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle. So I got myself a costume and put together a show, and this was before they really took off.
Yeah.
Shortly afterward, they exploded, and that was all that anybody wanted for their parties was Ninja Turtles. And I felt like I was the only guy in the ocean when a tidal wave hit with a surfboard.
Yeah.
I just took off. So my meme spread around all the other party planners in LA. And soon I was getting calls like you wouldn't believe. I would have a dozen calls an afternoon from asking me about different Ninja Turtles. I would have 5 different agents calling me for the same customer until the customer finally somehow located me directly. So I had to hire more people. I bought more costumes. I had more people. And soon I became a wholesaler where I had all the people that all the agents and event planners were going to get their Ninja Turtles.
Okay.
That evolved into other superheroes, Batman, Spider-Man, whatever. Ultimately, throughout the 90s, I was kind of one of the big suppliers of superheroes to all the agents and event planners. So that was kind of the first phase, is it just kind of organically evolved into this wholesaler concept.
Yeah, so you didn't even plan it. It just kind of came about.
Yeah, it was totally driven by demand.
Oh. So then what happened?
This was never supposed to be a career job for me. This was always my little part-time moneymaker until I finished graduate school and got my quote-unquote real job.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I had my real job, I had a corporate job for a while, and I was doing better with the parties on the weekends than I was with an MBA at Toyota's corporate headquarters. So I decided to go full-time and really commit to the entertainment as a career. So in 1997, I changed the name of my company and decided to call it Life of the Party.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened a kiosk in the local mall. The idea was going to be to book shows directly in the mall. And while we were there, because we had the space, we were also selling magic tricks and novelties. But the real focus I wanted it to be was to bring the concept of agency and party planning into the mall.
Mm-hmm.
And there was my first step into being a retailer. So up until now, I was pretty much a wholesaler. Now I wanted to develop my own clientele.
Okay.
So I opened up my company, went into the mall, and we booked a lot of shows, but the overhead was insane. I had to have it fully staffed, and I had to be open 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, or 12 hours a day, however long it was. So after about 10 months, I packed up the mall, the kiosk, but kept the agency running, which wound up being a very smart move because I still started booking tons of shows, but killed all the overhead at the same time.
Gotcha.
And the rest is kind of history. From there, it evolved into, my company grew and grew and grew. In 2000, there was a competitor who was a friend of mine who decided to retire, and she sold me her business, Auntie, Roxie and Company, and she had a lot of big clients. So I absorbed her company and merged that with Life of the Party, and we became Auntie Roxie's Life of the Party.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! And then a couple of years ago, another friend of mine decided to retire and sell her company, Happiness Unlimited, another big company in LA. I haven't merged the names. I'm still running them as separate companies, but I own Auntie Roxie's Life of the Party and Happiness Unlimited, which pretty much makes me one of the big boys in LA as far as the party planning space goes.
Wow. Well, let's get into this agency thing. So what's an advantage, or what are the disadvantages or advantages of working with agents?
Well, if we want to start with the disadvantages, I would say that the first thing you got to think about is discount pricing.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, you're going to have to offer an agent a discounted price over, again, think wholesale versus retail, because that agent's going to want to take your price and mark it up to the end customer. So you're going to have to offer a discount price, which will make sense. And, we can talk about how we calculate that later on.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that.
But in the short run, what it means is that you're going to be offering a discount price, so you're going to make less. And on a related note, if you offer a discounted price and you commit to a show, a higher price gig may come in that you now have to turn away. Mm-hmm. So that's another disadvantage is, wow, I've committed to this lower paying job and now I'm turning away higher paying jobs.
Yeah.
Another disadvantage is the lack of control. So when you book your own shows, you know exactly how to sell it. You know exactly what you need and all the details. An agent's acting as a middle person, and they may forget about some of these details, or they may not do a good job managing the customer expectations. And then you get in there and discover that that the customer's expecting something that you don't do. And as a performer who's worked for agents, I've had that happen more times than I care to admit, where I would show up and the people would be like, I would look at the information that the agent gave me and, oh, I'm supposed to juggle. Well, I don't juggle.
You were telling me a story just yesterday about singing, right?
Yeah.
What was that? Just tell the quick version.
I used to do characters, and I showed up at a party as Aladdin, and I was working with a friend of mine who was going to be Jasmine. And when I showed up, she says, let me know when you're ready to do the song.
Uh-huh.
What song? She says, the main love theme. We're supposed to sing it to each other. I said, nobody told me this. If they would have told me this, I would say, I don't sing, and I don't know this song. So I walk into the party, and the mom says, let us know when you're going to do the song. We want to videotape it. And I've got my brain spinning like, what am I going to do? And then all of a sudden, Candace, my friend, hits play, and the music starts playing, and I'm in panic mode. And then I see the kid had a bunch of toys, including a toy microphone. So I grabbed the microphone, shoved it up in front of my face, and just nodded my head like I was lip syncing, covering my mouth. And I was really, really boiling red when I had a talk with the agent after that.
Oh, I'm sure. Okay, so those are some of the disadvantages. What are the advantages of working with an agent?
Well, I would say there's one other major disadvantage.
Go ahead.
Probably one of the biggest ones is no self-promotion.
Mm.
One of the benefits that you get when you work on your own is you get to meet other contacts, you get to pass out your business cards. With agents, you're representing the agent's company. So you're supposed to promote them. And and in a lot of areas and with a lot of agents, it's very taboo to promote your own self on an agent's job.
Sure.
And then jumping over to the advantages,
mm-hmm.
well, first, all the marketing costs and responsibility. That becomes the agent's job. So all of that time you need to spend right now doing advertising and sending out mailers and managing your phone and all that other good stuff that you're supposed to be doing as a successful performer. Your agent's picking up a lot of that work now.
Mm-hmm.
There's reduced marketing costs, there's reduced marketing responsibility. And part of that is also the ease of booking. So when you book a customer, you get the phone call, the customer wants you to tell them all about their show and talk about your pricing, and then they want to think about it, and then they want to go back and compare you to your competition. With an agent, once they know you and you've established yourself, for me, because I work with a bunch of event planners, I will get the call and they will say, are you available Saturday, March 15th, whatever the date is, at 2 o'clock in Los Angeles? And I'll look and I'll say yes. And they'll say, okay, pencil it in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get an email from them with all the information, and that's it. So what might take a 10-minute process of sales is less than a minute.
Yeah.
So ease of booking. Another one is high volume of gigs. With one customer, you might get booked once a year, maybe once every couple of years. If it's a really good customer, maybe a few times a year. If you've got a good agent and you're the first person they're calling to service, say, their puppet shows or their magic shows, then you're going to get all of their calls. So one agent can give you, depending on the agent, it could be a handful of shows or it could be a whole ton of shows.
Oh yeah, I've heard of 20,
Yeah.
30, 40 shows in
Exactly.
a year, right?
Depending on the agent and how successful they are at marketing whatever it is you're promoting.
Now, one of the neat things about having an agent too is that they have markets that we are not privy to.
Yeah, it's a big one. People don't think about it, but high profile and celebrity gigs, so big corporate gigs. And people say, well, why can't the performer just market themselves and get those big gigs? And the answer is a lot of these high profile clients, when they're hiring for a party, they're putting on an event. So they are going to be ordering catering and pony rides and a magic show and everything, the DJ. And they don't want to call up everybody piecemeal. So they will call oftentimes an event planner who will coordinate everything. So if you want these big gigs, you're probably going to have a greater chance of doing it through an agent than you would just trying to market yourself. Gotcha.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think one of the first parties I ever was hired for, they actually had an ice sculpture of the birthday child.
Exactly.
They had a petting zoo, an ice sculpture. They had face painting. It was a whole thing.
I've seen some crazy, crazy parties where people are spending $10,000, $20,000 on their kids' parties. And I'm thinking, wow, you got way too much money, but I'm glad I'm a part of what you want to spend it on.
Exactly. Well, speaking of money, you talked about calculating your prices. Now, an agent calls me and says, what is your agent price? How do I go about calculating that?
You know, there are a bunch of different ways that you can figure this out. And there's no one right answer. One way to do it is to calculate the actual value of the service that the agent is providing. So let's say, for example, that you spend about 25% of your show covering your expenses like sales, advertising, processing orders, all of these things that you have to do in order to book a show with a customer. Well, you can actually take the time and figure out how much of your income is that part of it. So let's say you make, I don't know, a couple $100 for a gig, and 25% of your time is spent on the booking and advertising process. So 25% of a $200 would be $50.
Okay.
If an agent is absorbing that, you could reduce your price by $50 in order to compensate the agent for the portion that they are picking up on.
Right. Makes sense because you're just picking up the phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're basically paying the agent to absorb that percentage of your expenses. Another approach you could take is what is the market price? So a lot of times if you've got friends that work for agents in your area that are doing something similar and they're willing to share their information with you, you'll soonest find out that all the people who are doing, say, a clown show, they're all charging to agents about $150 an hour or whatever that number happens to be. So that's the ballpark you need to play in if you want to do the agency gig over there. Another thing to think about is volume. So if a customer were to call you and say, hey, I want to book you 10 times this year, can you give me a discount? You would say, yeah.
Absolutely.
And then what would that discount look like? That's
Mm.
something that you should factor into your agent price, because with any luck, they're going to be giving you a similar volume. And then another approach would be considering the agent's budget. Sometimes an agent will call you up and they'll say, hey, I can afford to pay you $200 on this job.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a right to look at that and say that I'd like that, that's attractive, or no, I don't, it's not worth my while, or I'm interested, but can give them a counter proposal. Can you do 225? But that's another way is you take a look at, let the agent kind of dictate what they want to pay and then decide whether or not it's worth your while.
Gotcha.
And then I'd say the bottom line is you take all of these factors, float them around in your head, and then go with what makes sense after considering all of these in terms of what would be a reasonable win-win scenario. Because the agent's going to take your price and mark it up, and they need to be able to be competitive with what you would sell your show to an actual customer.
Now, what would you say to the people that say, well, I have an agent, but he charges 50% or 40% or 30% or whatever percentage it is. What percentage is too high? What would you say to somebody who's saying, oh, the percentage they're charging is way too high?
My answer to that is, so what? And I put a little asterisk on there because there are times where I think that is important. I think that a lot of performers get stuck on, how dare the agent make so much money when I'm only making this much?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that if an agent is making that much money, your takeaway shouldn't be, how dare they make that much money? Your takeaway should be, maybe I should charge more to other customers, because if the agent can sell me for that price, I should be able to sell me for that price.
Mm.
But that being said, as far as getting mad at the agent for pocketing that money, what a lot of performers forget is that agent is working for that money and they have overhead. They're not seeing that money. Let's say that percentage that the agent is taking, they have to pay their advertising bills, their office expenses, their office staff, their insurance, their electricity, their phones, everything that goes into running an agency. Whatever's left over after they do all of that, and they're monitoring the phones and they're doing their work and processing their contracts. And whatever's left over after they pay all their bills is what they get to keep. And I can guarantee it's not the percentage that you think that they're charging. I did have an asterisk attached to that. The asterisk is, it does matter if an agent oversells your show and doesn't do a good job properly managing client expectations.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if, for example, you've got a show that you would normally sell for $500,
okay,
and that's a fair price for it, and this agent sells it for $1,000, the customer is going to expect a $1,000 show.
Mm.
If they get a $500 show, they may turn around and say, I did not get my money's worth. And they're right, because the agent oversold your show.
Gotcha.
That, to me, is one reason for why you have a right to be upset if an agent is overselling your show.
Mm.
But to me, that's going to be on the agent, not on the performer.
So I get a call from an agent and he says, showtime is 2:00. I say to him, well, great. I'll get there at 1:30 or 1:15 and set up and do my show at 2:00. And then later on, I get a phone call from the agent that says, oh, call time is 10 in the morning because you have to set up at 10 in the morning. And that wasn't what was originally contracted with my price. What do I do then?
That's one of my pet peeves. And usually you won't get it. You'll find it buried in the information that they email you. So as a performer, my pet peeve is just that. The agent contracts you to be ready to go at 2:00. And then when you get your email, it says performer will be set up and ready to go by 1:30 or however, 1:00. And they've added call time to you.
Yeah.
My response to them is to send them an email and say, hey, I see you've added a call time on this. I'm available to do that. My call time rate is X dollars. And usually it's a discounted rate. And what almost always happens is the agent will come back and say, oh, I didn't know I had to pay for that. No, just get there in time.
Oh, just get there at 1:30. You'll be fine.
Exactly. Just be ready to go on time. Because as soon as they realize that you're not free, they suddenly back away. Now, occasionally they'll say, yeah, we need you to be set up. So, okay, I'll pay that extra price. In that case, take it seriously because they're basically buying insurance to make sure you're ready to go.
Right. And I know a lot of these bigger events, they want you set up and ready to go and the whole thing looking pretty before the customers get there.
Exactly. And hey, I have no problem with that,
Yep.
but you got to pay for the additional time.
Got it.
And I'll tell you a little funny story about that.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I was having an agent hire a Santa Claus through me.
Mm-hmm.
So my Santa, who's a friend of mine, I booked him, and then the agent sent me the information and had snuck in a call time, 30-minute call time. And so I wrote an email to the performer saying, we got another agent here who's doing one of these sneaking in a call times. It really irritates me when they do this. I'll deal with it. Only I inadvertently sent that message back to the agent.
Oh, no.
And
great.
Just when I started realizing what I had done, because I'm looking at the emails like, wait a minute, why did this go here? Oh, no. And that's when my phone rang.
Oh.
And the agent was calling up, what is this, blah, blah, blah. Then I just had to eat crow and say, you know what? I am so sorry. This is just such a common problem and it frustrates performers because it happens a lot. And I told him, you've just been perfect. You've been a good gentleman. I think this was just...
You're like, I screwed up. What do you want?
And we laughed it off and moved on. But
one of the interesting things when I was reading your lecture notes was the commodity versus unique programs. That was kind of interesting because I'd never thought about that before. Tell me about that.
As performers, we're all about trying to promote a unique show. The more unique we are, the more special we are, the more people are going to want us. And that's smart. You don't want to be part of the crowd. However, with an agent, they don't want the uniqueness. They want something that they can just sell. And the reason is, let's say I get a call for a magic show. I'm not sure which magician I'm going to be able to send out when the customer is calling me. So I've got to describe it in a very generic way. So maybe I'll say, our magicians do about a 40-minute show. They make balloon animals, blah, blah, blah. And, they're fun. They, real generic terms. If I've got a performer who says, I've got a very unique show, I do a 20-minute magic show, and then I do this, a magic workshop, and then I turn into an elephant, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's going to be really hard to fit into my generic description. So agents want the commodity. They want to be able to do the mass market, unless they're an agent who really specializes in the high-profile, unique shows where they really take the time with the customer and go over the resumes of every option. The agents that are doing the mass market thing, they're going to want the commodity. So you want to actually adjust your show to fit what they're describing.
If you're working for an agency that books out a commodity, a type of like you're saying, a magic show or something like that.
Yeah, if you're working with an agency that kind of does a high volume,
mm-hmm.
If there's an agent that specializes in high-end events, they may be more inclined to really go into detail about each performer, and that's going to be there. Your uniqueness will stand out.
Gotcha.
But your regular party planners, most of them are going to want the high volume and just make it simple. They want to be able to describe a very simple description.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Now, how would I market my own services to an agent?
You're going to want to think about your marketing in a couple of different ways. You want to think about selling yourself to the agent so that they get excited and say, I got to use this guy. And then you want to think about giving the agent marketing tools so that they can then promote you to your customer. So the first part, marketing yourself to the agent, this is all going to be about focusing on the things that agents want. So they're going to want to know that you're good. And how do you prove you're good? Kind of nothing unique about this. Same thing to marketing yourself to customers. You're going to want to be able to showcase your experience, your training, letters of recommendation, all of the things you do, testimonials to prove that you do a good service.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can also agents want reliable. So they want to know that you are going to show up, you're going to show up on time, you're going to be ready to go, you're going to do what you say you're going to do. So make sure you do a good job with that, because there's nothing worse as an agent than getting that panic call. Where's my performer?
And it seems to me, too, you would want to figure out what type of an agent that you're going after. Like if you have a commodity type of show, like you do that 40-minute show with 20 minutes of balloon animals, or that's what you can offer, that you would go with more of a commodity type agent. Whereas if you turn yourself into an elephant, like you were saying, you would want an agency that specializes in those unique programs, right?
Exactly.
I think your dog agrees.
That's my agent. If you've got an agent that's really doing the high-end stuff, then the marketing material you're going to want to focus on is going to be the uniqueness with that agent, but it's still going to be kind of the same idea of proving yourself worthy, that you do a really good show and that you're reliable. So my answer is yes. Another thing that you're going to want to be able to describe in your marketing materials that is important to agents is the ease of booking. They want to know that they can reach you, that you're available by phone and text and email and Twitter and smoke signals.
Yeah.
Because when an agent gets a call, and a customer wants to book them, the agent needs to be able to confirm that you're available. And it just doesn't sound good to tell the customer, I'll call you back tomorrow when I know. They want to be able to get that customer that information right away.
Or especially, I'll call you back in a couple of days. Yes,
exactly. Because now and it just makes the agent look like, agents want to create the perception that their performers work exclusively for them, even if that's not the case.
Interesting.
If they have to wait a couple days to get that answer, it kind of tips off the idea that they're contracting somebody else, and it makes the customers start to question whether or not they should go with an agent rather than search on.
So I find myself an agent or a couple of agents, and how do I get to the top of their list? Because they're not calling everybody on their list, every magician on their list if they have 10 magicians. How do I get to the top of that list so they're calling me?
Yeah, that's one of the big secrets. People think that, gee, if I'm one of the performers that work for this agent and they get a whole bunch of shows, it's going to be divided equally. No, that's not the way it works. What really works is when I get a call as an agent myself, I've got my favorite one or two people that I call first.
Yeah.
Only when they're not available do I then start digging into the bench and going down the list and going to some of the other performers. If you want to get the volume, you really want to be one of those first calls from that agent. To get to the top of the performer list, some of the things that agents are going to consider are they their favorite performer? So a lot of my performers I call first, they've proven themselves worthy. They've got a great track record. My customers love them. A lot of times they're personal friends. You want to kind of build that relationship. Geography is a big part, and you have no control over this, unfortunately. But if I know I've got a customer that's out in Riverside and I've got a performer out in Riverside, he might be the first one I'm going to call. We already talked about ease of contacting. So
yeah,
if there's a performer that takes forever to call me back, they're not going to be on the top of my list to call right away. Then price, if you've got a performer who's not giving me a competitive wholesale price, I will only call them when I'm desperate. Another big one is requests. If I've got customers who are requesting one of my performers because they had them before, they were referred by one of my other customers, that gives me a lot of information about this performer, that this performer is doing a great job and they're promoting my business instead of handing out their own cards. This performer is generating business for me. This is somebody I want to be booking a lot.
Yeah.
The more you can create requests for your services on behalf of the agent, the more that agent's going to start calling you.
Got it. So if you're number 8 on the list, you may not get very many calls, huh?
Exactly. And it's just kind of the fact of life until the other guys, move away or some have mysterious accidents and you move your way up the list by attrition.
But if you're number 8 and you're not getting those calls, you need to reevaluate how you're presenting yourself to the client and to the agents, right?
The question you have to ask yourself is it something you're doing, or is it just that the guys who are getting the calls before you are so entrenched that it's going to be really hard to move the agent off of them?
Now, you were talking about business cards earlier. You have a sneaky little way of giving out business cards for the clients. I mean, it's for the agent still.
Exactly.
And what is that? Tell us that, because I love this idea.
Well, remember, the goal is to get those customers to call the agent and request you, because that's how you're going to shoot your way up to the top of the list. Best way you can do that is to first do a great show and then follow that up by aggressively promoting the agent's business. But you want your name to be requested. So I've got a little name stamp that says Dave Skale, magician, entertainer, hypnotist, and a really cool dude. And I stamp it on every agent's business card. That way, when the customers call the agent to request a performer, they know who they're asking for.
And it gets you to the top of that list too.
Yep.
That's a great idea. I love that.
Especially when a lot of the other guys aren't doing that. So you're the only one getting requested. Oh, you better believe you get a big spotlight on you in that agent's mind.
Great strategy. All right. So I get a call from an agent. I've gotten to the top of that list and I get a call from an agent and he says, oh, could you hold March 15th for me at 2:00? And then what happens after that?
Well, on my end, I have a couple of different categories for how I reserve things in my calendar. I have holds and confirms. And then I also have inquiries. So if an agent is calling me up and saying, are you available on this day? I'll say, yes. Do you want me to schedule that? Do you want me to put anything in the book? And sometimes they'll say no, because they know this is just a customer who's looking around and they just want to check. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, this is a customer where maybe it's a big corporate gig and you're one of many things that they're ordering and they're finalizing their plans. So they're not going to be able to contract this until they get everything done, but they need to get everything lined up and commit and reserved. Or maybe it's a customer who's, it sounds like they're really interested, but they want to sleep on it. For whatever the reason is, they want you to reserve that time for them, but it's not confirmed. So to me, that's a hold. And what I will do is I will put it in my schedule as a hold. And then if somebody else calls me up for that time slot, I will go back to the agent and say, hey, look, I've got somebody else who wants that time. I need to know by the end of the day, or I need to know within 24 hours. Mm-hmm. Give the agent enough time to get back to their client and get them to either commit or free you up. But it doesn't want to be, you don't want it to be so long of a time that you lose the potential for another sure thing.
Yeah.
For me, a hold is when I give the agent 24 hours to commit or let me go. And then I've got the confirmed show. That's where the agent says, yes, this is booked. And that's where it's confirmed. And then I stop. If anybody else wants me for that time, I'm reserved.
Mm-hmm. And then you're committed, whether you get a higher paying gig or not.
Exactly. Now there is if I get a higher paying gig, which occasionally happens and it's substantial, I will go back to the agent and say, hey, look, I know I'm confirmed on this job. Can I substitute it? Can you get it covered? I've got an opportunity for something really big here. And sometimes the agents will work with you on that. Sometimes they've got other people on their roster and they'll say, let me see what I can do. They'll free you up. There's nothing wrong with asking, but if they can't do it, you got to honor your commitment.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a tightrope to walk too, because you have to, as you're asking that, you have to listen to the agent's reaction too.
Yeah.
See if the agent has a positive reaction to you asking that or a negative reaction to it.
Well, they're never going to be happy because they've done all their work already and gotten you set up. So it's a chore for them. But if you've got a good relationship with it, they get it. As long as you don't do it that often and it's not a regular thing.
Gotcha.
They'll do what they can to help you out if you've got a good relationship.
Oh, that's cool. Now, should I have a separate website without my phone number and contact information on it?
I am surprised so few people do this. And the answer is absolutely. You should have your website that's designed to promote you to your customers and to agents. And this website can have your name, background, your social security number, all your details. And then you should also have a sister website where there's no name or no last name at least, no contact information, no prices. And that is going to be the agent-friendly website that they can refer their customers to learn about who you are without being able to locate you directly.
Got it. And you can have one website for a number of different agents too, because it's just a website with no contact information, right?
Exactly. It's your agent-friendly website. My agent-friendly website has been sanitized. There's no contact info. There's no last name. There's no prices. I also removed my letters of recommendation and articles about me that are in the news because both of those include my name and contact info. So those don't appear on my agent-friendly website. But other than that, all the show descriptions, my background, all of that is on there so that the agent can then explain to the customers why they should book me through them.
And I'll bet the agents love that, huh?
They do. And it also becomes easy because the agents will often call me up and say, hey, Dave, can you send me over a picture of this? And I'm thinking, this is like the third time this month you've asked me this. And instead of sending them the same pictures over and over again, and because they're not organized, I just say, go to my website. It's all right there for you.
Here's my link.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Now, what if you get a customer complaint, or what if the agent gets a customer complaint? And here I am, the entertainer. I may or may not know exactly what happened, or maybe the agent didn't know exactly what happened, but he's got to listen to the customer and he's got to listen to the entertainer because maybe the agent wasn't there.
Yeah, that's one of the other challenges about working with agents is there's now a third party involved, which makes complaints messy. especially if the agent's acting as the referee, because like you said, they weren't there. So they're going to have the customer telling them one thing. They're going to have the performer telling you another thing. And to make matters worse, part of the problem might be the agent's fault. And even though they're acting as a referee, they may be responsible. So first, being aware that you have this confusing dynamic is the first step to dealing with it. When I'm in the middle as an agent myself, I will listen to what the performer tells me and what the customer tells me. And I'll ask myself, of these things, what are objective? You know, the client says they were late. They got here 25 minutes late. The performer says, I was late, but I was only 10 minutes late. Okay, they're both giving me something very objective, but you have different stories, different versions of the story. Is there any way we can verify which one is accurate? And if not, you just kind of have to say, okay, I'm not sure how I can figure out which one of these is true, but I'm going to try to get to the bottom of it. And then the other side, which is subjective, which is where the customer might say, he just wasn't very good. His clothes were dirty, whatever.
Yeah.
And the subjective stuff, there I tend to lean a little bit more on the performer's reputation. So if I've got a performer who has always done an outstanding job, I'm going to, and the performer says that's absolutely not true, I'm going to give the performer some credibility on that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I've had weird complaints where, you know, the customer might say that the performer said something that was really crazy. And I say to myself, you know what? Much as I hate to admit it, I could see that happening because I know this performer.
Yeah.
You know, that's where so you kind of have to use your best judgment as the agent. And then you have the part where the agent's responsible. So just this past weekend, I did a job for an agent. She sent me to the wrong street. Instead of Glen Oaks Boulevard, it was Glendale Boulevard. And I wound up being very late because I was driving all over Glendale trying to figure out where the location was.
Glendale Boulevard. That's huge.
It wound up being a real pain. And to her credit, she apologized and when everything was said and done and owned it. But an agent can make the mistakes there too. And the agent can also make a mistake in selling the performer. There was an agent who promoted magicians. And the first magician he ever promoted had his very unique show that combined magic, juggling, and balloon animals.
Yeah.
So in this agent's mind, all magicians do that exact same show.
Yeah.
From then on, all of the shows were sold with magic, juggling, and balloon animals. And most magicians don't juggle, and most magicians would say, stop selling this with juggling. We don't juggle. And the agent would say, oh, just fake it. And it's like, you can't fake that. It's insulting.
Yeah, so you show up and they're expecting you to juggle.
Exactly. And if a customer were to complain on that, we would be able to point to the agent and say, this is your responsibility. We told you numerous times we don't do this. So this is your fault. So the dynamics of complaints gets a little tricky when you have an agent involved. So once you kind of figure out what really happened and get all the facts laid out, then you got to figure out what is worth in terms of compensation. Let's say that there really was a legitimate problem and the customer deserves to be compensated. This is the other part that gets messy. So let's say you're a performer and you charge, I'll just use real simple numbers. Let's say you would normally charge $150 retail to a customer, but to the agent, you're only charging $100. And now let's say that agent marks you up to $150.
Okay.
And the customer complains, maybe you had the show scheduled wrong and you didn't show up on the right date and it was totally your fault. And the agent says, you know what? I'd like you to give my customer a free show. And personally, as a performer, if I make that kind of a boo-boo and I didn't show up to a gig, that I think would be very fair. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I would too. Yeah, you got to guarantee that you're going to be there.
Exactly.
Especially if it's your mistake, yeah.
So it's like, fine. So I do a free show. I've lost my $100. I'm giving them $100 in value. That seems really generous, right? And then the agent says, but I'm also out my $50 commission. So now you are being liable for the customer's loss and the agent's loss. Is that fair? And this is where things get a little bit messy, and there's no right answer to this. You might be legally responsible for all damages that were caused because you dropped the ball, which means that you might be responsible for more than you were willing to make. So if you were only charging $100, you might be responsible for $150 in damage. And that's the kind of things that you need to be aware of as a performer if there's a problem. You may want to discuss it at the front end with the agent, what their policy is on dealing with this. As an agent myself, usually I am willing to eat my commission as long as my customers are taken care of, unless the problem was so egregious that the performer did, then I would want them to also reimburse me for my lost commission. But not all agents take that approach.
And if you're talking about a small amount of money, the agent isn't going to go through the trouble for the $50. If it's 500 or 1,000 or 2,000, then.
And that's where things can be real messy, because exactly, what if you're selling your show for $100 and the agent sells it for 500? You don't show up for some unknown reason. Are you now responsible for 5 times your price?
Yeah.
That's real good stuff to at least consider and think through.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to go on to some fan questions. You want some fan questions, Dave?
Oh, I love fan questions.
You love fans, don't you?
I love all my fans, both of them.
If you haven't figured it out, Dave is a friend of mine, so I can hassle him a little bit. All right. Here we go. Some fan questions. We're going to start with Michael Worsham. He's an excellent magician out of Maryland. He asks, if the event planner is too busy to watch the entertainment that they have hired for the client, how do they know or determine whether they should be hired again?
Good question, Michael. The first thing is, make sure you don't get a complaint.
Yeah.
I don't have to be there to know I've got a problem pretty quickly. If I've got a complaint, then that's going to be a bad thing. If I'm an agent that's really wants to make sure I know what I'm selling, but I haven't been able to take the time to watch your show, I might have watched your promo material. If you've got good promo material or video samples, that will give me a good idea of what I'm selling. But there are plenty of agents who won't even go that step. The quickest and easiest way is to, as an agent, simply call my customer up and ask how was their experience. And there are a lot of agents who will do this. Customers may say, oh, he was great. Bam, they know. The customer may say, he was great, but he was late. Okay, that's something I'm going to have to be concerned about. The customers may say, he was just all right. All right, and that's going to really make me rethink about where this performer is going to be on my roster.
Yeah, he's suddenly number 8 on your list.
Yeah, he's my emergency call when when all right is good enough, but not going to be great.
Giuseppe Riano, otherwise known as Joe Self, a lot of you out there know him, one of the top marionette artists in the country, asks, how should entertainers go about finding reputable agencies? And how do agencies find good entertainers? Kind of the other side.
Great question. And before I answer, I've got to confess something. Joe's an old dear friend of mine. I don't know if you know this, John. Joe used to book me out. So he acted as an agent for me many, 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 many years ago, back in the Ninja Turtle days.
I didn't know that.
So shout out to Joe.
Hey, Joe.
So to find an agent, in the age of the internet, you got to put yourself in the shoes of your customers, of the end customers. So where do customers go to find agents? They Google it. Whatever a customer is going to look for to find an agent, you could probably find them doing something similar. There are specialty agents who maybe specialize in cruise ships or fairs and festivals. And those guys are going to be a little bit trickier to find. You can talk to other performers, and if you live in a community where performers are a little more generous and sharing, they may help point you in that direction as to who to go to. Or you could actually call up some of their end customers. You can call up a fair or a cruise ship line and ask who does your bookings, and they may refer you to the agents that do that, and then that will kind of lead you down that path. Sometimes you might actually be at a fair and you might see a performer and you might ask them, hey, do you mind if I ask who does your bookings? And that they may be honest and help direct you to who their bookings are. A good one is if you ask a performer that you see at one of these venues for their card, if they're representing the agent, they ethically should probably hand you their agent's card instead of yours. That's the information you really want.
Tricky.
And then lastly, if you're working a gig, you might work with other performers. If you become friends with these other performers, you guys start trading information back and forth. So I've learned a great deal by making friends with other performers on gigs who then referred me to other agents and vice versa.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's silly to think of other people as competition. Instead, think of them as your friends. You'll get a lot more business.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about this earlier, John.
Yep.
Seems like Southern California is a little bit unique in that. In LA, a lot of my competitors are my friends and customers, and it's that there's a lot of camaraderie in the entertainment industry and the party industry in LA. I've talked to other performers around the country, and apparently it's not like that elsewhere, which is a real shame.
That's what I've heard. I mean, you and I are the perfect examples. We're both magicians. We're both in the same market, yet we give each other business.
Exactly, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, there's enough business out there.
Now, I do, talk bad about you behind your back, but that's only a competitive
Yeah.
advantage.
It's only because it's true. All right. Conrad Cologne, a terrific magician out of New Jersey, asks, what qualities should an entertainer look for when deciding on an agency to work for?
Another good question.
Mm-hmm.
Reputation's going to be a big one.
Sorry, I was laughing about the previous comments. That's all. I wasn't laughing about Conrad's.
Let me put my Conrad hat back on here.
Yeah.
What to look for in a good agent?
Yes.
Well, you first you want to see if they're legit, and their website will tell you a lot. If it looks like they have a good professional website, that's indicative of somebody who's taken the time to build a decent company. Not always though, because I've had some agents had some big companies that were real flaky behind the scenes. Their reputation is going to be a big one. Talking to other performers who have worked with them, they'll be able to tell you the good and the bad of those agents. When you actually start working with an agent, there are some things that the good ones will do and the bad ones are not so good at. Some agents are really good about getting me the information as soon as they book it. I get something by email. It's all the details. I am good. I feel like this is contracted. This is booked. We're ready to go. Other agents will say, yeah, it's booked. And then they'll wait till the last minute to send me the info. And not only does that make me bite my nails when I've got other inquiries because I've got no information on this job, and every once in a while when I call up an agent and say, hey, you've had this booked and it shows in 2 days, where's the info? They'll say, oh, that canceled. Didn't I call and tell you?
Oh, yeah, I've had that happen myself.
Yeah, and it's like, no, you did not call and tell me.
And then it's too late.
So getting you the information early is something that better agents will do. And the other problem with waiting till the last minute, I've had this happen where an agent will send me the information and I'll look at it and say, this is not what you told me. You told me it was at 2 o'clock. This says 3 o'clock. And then, of course, they say, no, I said 3. And it's like, well, there's no way we can know for sure because it was a month ago. Now, is there? It's too bad you didn't send this to me right away.
That's right. And I have another show at 4 o'clock.
Yep. And I'm no longer available. So my policy with agents that wait till the last minute, and I tell them this, I say, if you send me this stuff at the last minute, and there's a problem, I cannot take responsibility because these are problems that could have been caught if you sent it to me earlier. Other things that some agents are better at is getting you paid on time. Unlike when dealing with normal customers or final customers, you get paid on the spot. With agents, a lot of times you're going to have to get paid after the fact. Some are really good at paying you within a couple of weeks, which I think is really reasonable. I think up to a month is doable. And in some cases, even longer than a month, if it's a job where the agent has told you, hey, I'm going to have to invoice the customer. It's going to take up 6 weeks for me to get paid, and then I'll have the funds available to pay you. As long as I know that up front, I'm cool. But then there are agents who, they're just not good at managing their money. They've spent your money, and now you're waiting a month to get paid, and now you got to call them up and say, you really need to pay me on this. That gets pretty annoying.
Yeah, I've had, last Christmas season, I worked for an agent I was involved in a giant event, probably a $50,000 event. She said she couldn't pay until the client paid her, which makes sense. $50,000, it's a lot of money. There was catering, there was me, there's a number of different entertainers and such. Mm-hmm. But she was nice. She called ahead of time and said, listen, you're not going to get your check until I get that $50,000 check from the client. And I said, okay.
Now, the one thing that you do want to make sure of, though, if an agent tries to tell you that, what you don't want to do is contractually bind yourself to that customer paying their bill, the end customer. In other words, so what happens if the customer doesn't pay the agent? Does that mean you don't get paid? And you want to make sure that, no, ultimately you'll get paid one way or another and that the agent is absorbing that risk. And that's a big part of the problem there, too, is the agent's job is supposed to be to absorb the customer's risk. So if the customer bounces their check, if the customer doesn't pay, it's supposed to be the agent that goes after that customer, and it's supposed to be the agent who pays you because the agent hired you, not the customer. Your contract is with the agent.
Right.
And as an agent, I'm dealing with that right now. I've got a customer who booked one of my performers who hasn't paid their bill, and I'm getting ready to send them a demand letter and have to take them to court because they're just disappearing on me. My performer will get paid out of my pocket.
Yeah, you're responsible for that.
Exactly. But not all agents realize that, or not all agents are good at that. And they may say that, but when it becomes real, they may try to him and ha and make it other people's fault and point fingers and not honor their commitment. Now, as a performer, if I've got an agent who's been bamboozled, who's now in trouble, and they say, hey, look, I got a problem here. Can you work with me on this? I'll usually work with them. Maybe I'll give them a break on my price, or maybe I'll give them some payment options, to pay it off over time. So I will absolutely work with them in that situation. But at the end of the day, the responsibilities should be the agents, and not all agents are good at doing that.
Yeah. And that kind of goes to Conrad's question about having a good agent as opposed to one that's not quite as responsible.
Yeah.
We'll move on to Annie Benanni's question. Annie Benanni, the balloon story, tell her we both know her out of Southern California, asks, how do you market an agency as opposed to a single performer?
I was thinking about that question, and the answer is...
That's a big question.
The same and yet different. So all of the strategies that you would apply to marketing yourself in terms of an internet presence, a website, direct mail, it's going to be the same. The biggest difference is, instead of saying, this is what I do, you're going to be saying, I am your one stop for everything. And so your message is going to be a little bit different. Your message is going to be advertising a whole bunch of different stuff and drawing people into your website where they could see a whole bunch of different choices rather than your individual specialty.
All right, so now you're going to be speaking at Performers University, telling all about all this stuff that we've talked about and much, much more, right?
Yes, I am, amongst some other prestigious speakers. And
what is the Performers University? What is that? I know I've spoken at it for 2 years in a row. I know what it is, but tell our listeners what it is.
As a fellow alumnus of Performers University, John,
yes.
Ken Frawley, who I believe was your number one podcast.
Episode number 1. If you want to know how to book those library shows, listen to that episode number 1, Ken Frawley. It's amazing.
Yes. And Ken has basically devoted his life to promoting performers. And he has done all these amazing things in his career, really designed to get performers to get additional business and to up their game. Over the last few years, he has developed this concept called Performers University, which is a one-day conference of different speakers who performers will come and listen to about different subjects. So I believe this year we have somebody who's talking about marketing. We have Dwayne who's talking about marketing and marketing strategies for the performer. We have Michelle who does an amazing school assemblies, educational assemblies for science, and she's going to be talking about how to market school shows and educational programs. Mm-hmm. We have somebody named Steve. I don't know him personally, but apparently he's got a whole bunch of information about tax strategies for self-employed entertainers.
Oh.
And then Pete Ellison, who has been there several years in a row, and he's a tech guy, and he's also an entertainer, and he's the creator of Show Operations, and he is all about SEO and internet strategies for the entertainer. Mm-hmm. There's another magician, I don't know him personally, Scott Tokar. He's the keynote speaker, and he is the author of How to Make Six Figures in Magic, and he's going to be sharing the secrets of his success to performers. And then there's me. I'm going to be talking about marketing to agents and event planners.
The infamous David Skale.
Dum, dum, dum.
And when is that?
That is coming up fast. That is Monday, April 1st, all day, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. in Anaheim. If you go to performersuniversity.com, you will see information for registering. Phone number for Performers University is 888-499-1270. For those who are listening to this podcast late, right now, this is 2019.
Yeah, and it's March. This will drop on March 25th, I believe. So April 1st is a week away. Register. Yeah. I will be there hanging out, listening to all of this great information. Dave will be there. All the people he's talking about will be there. So come on down.
And if you can't make it this year, I believe Ken's planning to do it next year again. Keep it on your radar and get a head start. There'll be a whole new lineup of speakers, and it is just a really great resource for the working performer on how to up their game and actually the business side of show business.
It is an excellent day, and everybody learns a lot.
And it's fun.
Yeah, and it's fun. Now, if someone wants to get your lecture notes on some of the stuff that we talked about today, or some of the things you're going to be talking about at Performers University, how do they go about getting that?
They can go to my website, davidskale.com. There is a link on there for products. Unfortunately, the technology that was used to build my website is obsolete, so that page is no longer, I can't clean it up anymore. I'm having to rebuild the entire website.
Can they also shoot you out maybe just an email and say, hey, I want your lecture notes?
They can absolutely shoot me an email. They could send it to david@davidskale.com, and that's Scale with a K, S as in Sam, K-A-L-E. Or you could find me on Facebook at David Skale, and again, S-K-A-L-E. Probably going to be the best ways to reach me.
You've given such great information, Dave, and you've given me your contact information. I think we're good. Are you good?
I am awesome, John.
Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Always, my friend.
I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of stuff out of it. I know I did.
That's all I can ask.
Thanks, Dave, again for doing the show.
You got it, John. I'll see you at Performers University.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.
Woo! That was a lot of info. I hope you took notes. Now, I want to thank all my listeners. If you found this podcast valuable, share it with your friends on your social media. You can reach me at john@thevarietyartist.com, and you can join my Facebook group at The Variety Artist, where you can ask me to ask questions of our guests. And tune in next week when I talk to Ace Miles. He has his own pirate ship that he takes to events. It's fascinating. Now go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.
That's all for this episode of The Variety Artist, but your journey continues on our website. Go to thevarietyartist.com for more strategies, insight, and resources, as well as show notes on today's guest to assist you in your career. We'll see you on the next episode of The Variety Artist. But until then, go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.